Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. My name is Zach Gardner, the Chief Architect at Keyhole Software, and I set off on a little bit of a mission about 6, 7 months ago. Generative AI was all that anyone could talk about, and frankly, I was a little sick, both about hearing about it, but maybe subconsciously not knowing enough about it. As a chief architect, I'm expected to know about everything, even things that I couldn't possibly know about. Generative AI, certainly among them. So I did what any self respecting chief architect would do. I scoured the four corners of the World Wide Web. I found people that came from a diverse set of backgrounds, people in industries that I don't normally get to work with, people that have insights, people that have been thinking about this for longer than I have, maybe even people that have been programming for longer than I've been born. I know I have these boyish good looks, but do not let that fool you. If I shaved my beard, I would look like I was 13 years old. No joke. Today with me, I have the esteemed Dr. Peacock. It's a chief architect like me and a CIO unlike me. Dr. Peacock, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Anytime, anytime. And just as a reminder for the more litigious audience members, all the views and opinions expressed in this program and the views and opinions of the participants do not reflect their employers, trade organizations they're affiliated with, yacht clubs they might be members of, loyalty programs at various supermarkets or grocery stores. It's just two dudes talking. We're just gonna have a good time. That's all. Totally all. So for those in our audience that have not heard of you yet, have not had the pleasure of meeting you, can you give them a little bit about your background? What industries have you worked in? Where'd you come from? What was the first thing, if you remember, the first thing you remember programming? It's always a good one.
Well, as I said, I introduced myself at least initially as Dr. Peacock. I have a doctorate in information technology with a specialization in algorithms, actually, but wireless network algorithms. But I've been in IT for a very long time. I won't bore anybody with how long. Much longer than you've been alive. Just saying. Because despite my good looks, I'm older too. But I actually began programming many, many years ago. It was actually in a entrepreneurial endeavor. It was actually doing a program for a game, and we were doing a transactional gaming platform. This is many years ago, and that's how I delved into that. And then since then, I have veered off, and I've gotten much more serious in nature. And I've been involved with organizations, anything from the smaller mom and pop all the way to global impacting. So that's who I am. And I'm presently the chief architect for 3BX, and I'm actually the CIO for a couple different other companies. But I was introduced to this so I can give my viewpoint on this particular topic.
For sure, for sure. So one of the things that we were talking about, I remember when we first spoke, it was January, maybe it's March right now.
Something like that.
It was really about cybersecurity. You know, these chatbots are out there. People are using generative AI to be able to create them, to be able to interact with human beings like you and I. What are some of maybe the risks that you're seeing or the risks that you've kind of heard about as it relates to chatbots?
Well, some of the risks that I think are fairly obvious are in terms of the denial of service attacks and stuff along those lines that bots can enable. Now, also, with the very nature of the learning bots, it enables them to find potential security risk and whatnot in a much more expedient fashion than a regular human could. I mean, previously you would have groups or bands of cyber attackers attacking. Now you can do the same thing with one bot, which is auto-generating. It could overwhelm the traditional defenses. And even as the more automated side of things comes into play, it really becomes a resource battle. Can you throw what can you throw at it in terms of resources? And then you got to take in consideration. I know I'm kind of focusing on one particular thing, but The biggest thing is, at what point is it you got to find a balance between what is functional and producing your product or your environment versus protecting it. Where's the line that you draw the buy off on that? I mean, that's something could be considered.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of one of the things that you touched on, now that we have these systems that are able to synthesize information at a much faster rate than, a human being with, just cognitive limitations can do, I almost wonder if there's going to be, in the not too distant future, funding for projects to be able to have chatbots that then try to defeat the other chatbots that are using generative AI. DARPA is actually doing that with one of their more recent funding opportunities. They've recognized the fact that generative AI, I mean, you can generate texts with it, you can generate silly pictures with it, as I am a large fan of, but you can also use it to generate code, and you can describe what you want. And there's the potential that the code that it generates contains security vulnerabilities. DARPA is funding efforts to be able to have large language models whose sole purpose is to sit there and receive the code that was generated from another large language model and to be able to point out the flaws in it. I'm curious if you've seen any strategies, any techniques, any insights into ways to combat we're bagging on chatbots here, but like just the proliferation and the ability for them to just be a larger attack surface than what we were used to.
Well, that's actually very true. And I was aware of those things going on. I wasn't aware that DARPA was doing it, but it makes sense. One of the biggest things is, just to slightly dive into that a little bit, is if you look into the code, there is a lack of sophistication at this point in time, but that's only right now. Right now, you can see certain automatic structures which bots generate, and you can see the way they structure things. It's obvious. I mean, I could look at something I know immediately if it was done by a bot almost. Now, as it matures, that's going to become more of an issue. And then the ability to systematically fight it, as you were saying, with bots of our own becomes mandatory. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, the biggest thing, well, actually, that's not, I was going to say the sophistication of what's being generated leaves very much to be desired, seriously. Now, I've actually seen a lot of developers or outsourced developing resources which have utilized it to fill in the gap or whatever. You got to watch it with this stuff because it's not good. A lot of the times it is very vulnerable, and it is not seamless enough for production level, in my opinion, because it does have numerous gaps just from the way it's generated.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I've
my thoughts.
I've been playing around with it a little bit too, and I think at least for me, like I've been doing this a long time. Like I I kind of know what I'm doing at this point. I
I
found that it's
can't
really
help it
good
all.
for for if I mean, I had a project where I needed to do some regression analysis in Python. And I was like, well, I kind of know what I'm doing. I could do a little bit of Googling, but I found my time was more effectively used by just simply asking ChatGPT, like, all right, what are the options? What are the things that I don't know? I could have spent, 15, 20, 25 minutes to be able to go through all these articles and synthesize it myself. But I found that it's a really good and effective starting point. But to your, the point that you've just drawn, copying and pasting into my source control and just hoping that whatever code it was trained on didn't contain any security vulnerabilities. I mean, that's a pretty big risk. That's the kind of thing that would keep a CIO up at night.
It is actually. It's exactly, I have no problem with using it. I use it sometimes too. Self-generating bots can churn out some valuable content. And it does then take me much less time to analyze it and then clean it up to the point where I am willing to sign off that it was mine.
Hmm.
Of course, that's a misnomer because in actuality, nothing's really mine. It's really the company's, but that's a whole different viewpoint.
Yeah.
I don't technically own anything, but that is it's a great resource. And if you're having issues determining what's the best way to go forward, great. That's an invaluable resource to do. I myself do the same thing. But then you have to take the time to look through it. And is it truly valuable and usable?
Hmm.
That's just highlighting the points that you pointed out. But yes.
Hmm. Yeah, there was actually a court case that happened. It was probably November, maybe October of last year. There was a eviction lawyer, I believe, out of Florida,
Mhm.
who submitted a brief to the judge, and the judge was looking through some of the court cases because, like lawyers, they will say, like, all right, this is my argument, and these are similar rulings that show that this argument that I'm using has been used in the past. It's known as stare decisis, like let the decision stand. And one of the things that the judge found interesting in this brief was that he had never heard of a lot of these court cases before. So, being a judge, he went through and did some due diligence and then came back to the lawyer and was like, well, I've never heard of these before. I looked them up on LexisNexis. It's not anywhere. Where'd you hear about these? And the eviction lawyer said, oh, well, I was kind of busy. I'm an eviction lawyer and everything, and I got a lot of things on my plate. So I just used ChatGPT and it output some stuff for me. And I was like, I kind of looked legit. So I copied and pasted it. And I think that the moral of the story is that these are tools. They're powerful tools. Like my iPhone is a very powerful tool. This pencil that I'm holding is a very powerful tool. It still takes a human being at the end of the day to be able to adjudicate the responses out of these tools and to be able to interpret what it is that is actually and truly effective from them. I'm curious if you've seen. We've kind of spent a little bit of time talking about maybe the downsides, a little bit of these tools. I'm curious if you've seen any really good and really compelling, like positive use cases for it outside of maybe just document analysis and synthesis. Anything else kind of come to mind for like really good and insightful use cases for these tools? Before we get into some of the more negative stuff.
Well, some of the stuff that came to my mind as you were speaking, I was some reason thinking about the potential algorithms that you could actually use to have a bot search for how valid the content is.
Hmm.
And that would be actually a very good marketable or commercial thing to do because I could think of ways it could be used to clean stuff up and look at the viability of what's being in there. Sorry, there's a side topic that's crossed my mind as you're talking.
Hmm.
So, in terms of good examples, well, I've seen it utilized for validating or removing some of the outliers of potential data, raw
Mhm.
data, so it can massage it down to the point where it's more usable and manageable for the developers or the users themselves. I've seen that.
Mhm.
Now that's a viable use for it. Other than the report stuff and about the potential shortcut for scriptings and things along those lines that you brought up, I could think that that would be a very valuable use for it is checking the raw data
Mhm.
in transit or at rest even. Because if you check that data in transit before it's actually utilized, then you could save a lot of valuable time on various different verticals or industries. I mean, especially manufacturing, it just came to mind. So that's a potential positive I can think of.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. I hadn't thought of that one before. It's almost like you would have not an adversarial generative AI, but maybe a quality assurance AI
Well,
is
the
a good
quality
way of thinking
control,
about it.
quality control, calling, yeah, can you say QAQC? That's what I was trying to get out of my mouth.
Right. All right. I mean, some of
In
the
that regard, yes. Now, you could do the same thing in a much more scaled down version, because I was thinking about exchanges on a device to device viewpoint. But
Mhm.
if you throw in the human aspect, you could use them as a quality check for various personal interviews and whatnot, for scouring for data,
Mhm.
capturing data for various data sets. Because right now, if you want to look at it from the data side of things, you have non-standardized data sets. You don't know what format it is or whatever. The bot doesn't care, as it's programmed appropriately. But the bot doesn't care. It could take and congeal all that in to something more usable.
Interesting.
This just crossed my mind. That if no one's done that, that makes sense.
Mhm. Hmm.
I don't know if they
Maybe
have
someone will
actually.
get a business idea out of this video cast. You never know. You never know. It
Well,
wouldn't be the first time.
I did a little thing with some data cleaning. I'm not going to get into the organization I did it with, and we were trying to do something along those lines, but it never came to fruition before I had to leave.
Hmm.
But that there is potential there, not just as not just as a suite or offering upon itself, even though it could be that, but as an addition to supplement other services that might be being offered. Just a side thought.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, in some ways, the technology kind of reminds me of blockchain. When it came out, it was supposed to be
Yes.
revolutionary. There was going to be so many use cases for it. And then what? I mean, we got a hodl, and then Bitcoin's up to 70 grand now. Like that's about it. It's not
Yeah.
a lot of things that it's good for. Generative AI, I mean, one of the things that kind of scares me, that we're in, March 2024, heading into an election in, just a few months, are the geopolitical risks of generative AI.
Oh,
There's, with the 24-hour news cycle, the potential that a news organization could accidentally pick up something that is completely fabricated because they want to be the first to break the story. If it bleeds, it leads. I'm curious if there's any other, existential threats other than the ones that we've talked about that you're kind of thinking about as a chief architect or a CIO, or even maybe just an American.
well, as a person, I think trumps them all, but that threat is already out there. I mean, there are already generated AI briefs from famous people, and generally, a lot of people don't validate what they're taking in, and they make automatic assumptions based on it. Oh, it's obviously true because so and so said it. That's a logic thing we're not going to get into, but I don't do that. But a lot of people do. Just because I heard it doesn't mean it's true. And you already see that kind of thing out there now. That very thing could then be turned around and could help to convict someone wrongly. Slander campaigns and stuff like that. Easily. I'm amazed it's not having more already. Maybe it is. I'm just not aware of it. That kind of thing is an obvious negative. I mean, my character slander, I could have having my character being slandered, or I couldn't phrase that well. I could be professionally getting slandered out there and not even be aware of it.
Hmm.
You know, if you have bad things that happen in your career, I know this has happened to me before. I'm like, I couldn't get back into a particular vertical for one reason or another. And I'm like, well, maybe it's because they heard about that problem that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago. What if it was, what if it was based upon something that never happened?
Hmm.
And there is no grounds for it, but how does the quote unquote audience know that? Because if you phrase it or position it appropriately, it doesn't matter. It's all about how the person reacted. And that paints you in a very bad light. And that could have very negative ramifications on yourself professionally, not just personally, but professionally. I mean, you think about that, made me think about something immediately there. When you talk about the cyberbullying and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
I would think that would be an avenue that the bot's going to come into play too. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just create a bot to bully somebody. Why not? I could pay a few bucks to get somebody create a bot to do that. Then I don't have to worry. Let somebody else do it. Let somebody else do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a negative slant. I'm sorry, I just came to mind. I
No,
I can
that's
go off
good.
on tangent, but I won't.
No, I mean the risks are definitely there, and I think we as technology practitioners need to be aware of them, kind of need to keep them front and center in our mind so that when we're deploying solutions, when we're talking to people that are thinking about deploying solutions, when we're talking to people that are thinking about deploying solutions, we can kind of steer them in the right direction. So no, I appreciate the insight. A lot of the things that you brought up, I hadn't really thought about before, which 100% is the point of this video cast. So,
It's all about conceptual, con in terms of content. A lot of these things you might not have, because if you're just going to sit around brainstorming,
mhm,
you have a tendency to go, and everybody does this. You go down certain avenues that you're familiar with. Unfortunately, for me personally, I don't have very many preconceptions, so I can go off in all kinds of weird directions. But those things have to be taken into consideration because, like you were saying, you have to be the gatekeepers, the control guards for these things being used appropriately. I mean, just because they can be done doesn't mean they should be done. I forget where I heard that.
I'm sure Patton said it. Patton said, or Eisenhower. It's one of
Somebody
those two
did. I don't
dudes.
know who.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great way to kind of wrap up the conversation. If people want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, where should they go? What social networks are you active on? Where can people find you on the weekends?
At home.
Yeah, good answer.
Honestly, if you do a search for me, you'll find me. There's a couple other people that come up more on the search results. Their SEO is better than mine,
Mhm.
but only a couple. And then there's me. And which is a little troubling considering some of the stuff I've done has been cleared, but we won't go there. But that stuff you can't find. Don't even look for that. But sorry, I digressed for a little bit there. But I'm actually on a lot of different networks, different stances of my persona or personality.
Mhm.
I'm on some of the social networks. You name them, I'm probably there somewhere. Not that I'm there a lot, but I visited.
Mhm.
And professionally, I'm on LinkedIn. I do a lot of networking there and stuff like that. There's a few other professional networks too. They're much less socially accepted, but I'm out there too. Just do a little search and you'll find me.
Okay. We'll do.
Dr.
We'll do.
P, Dr. Peacock, whatever, there I am.
Yeah, social networks, they're a great place to visit, terrible place to live.
Exactly. You could waste so much time and achieve nothing. I normally have time. I'm only going to be here for so long. I fail most of the time, but not by that much. I say, okay, I've been here half an hour. I'm gone.
Good,
But
good.
yes,
So it's a lesson we all can learn. So no, Dr. Peacock, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it as always, dude.
my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me. I
Yeah,
hope
and
this benefits those who listen.
me too. And ladies and gentlemen, catch you in the future.